Frank, thank you. First, I always appreciate the opportunity to have conversations, to speak on a stage, virtual or in person, about the things that I'm really passionate about. And for anyone that knows me, if you don't know, one of the things I'm most passionate about is leadership. I think when it comes to security effectiveness, everything rises and falls on leadership. And so, other SAN summits that you've been to, deeply technical topics. You're going to talk about how to secure certain things, how to leverage certain technologies, how to conduct certain types of investigations, whatever it may be. This summit was created for all of the other aspects of security. As a leader, that you need to be able to embody and harness and display. And I will not talk about anything that I'm not passionate about. So if you ever see me up talking about something, it's something that I'm passionate about. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And yes, Frank, great introduction. I appreciate it. I don't have to spend as much time introducing myself. I am Jerich Beeson. For those that weren't here earlier, I have spent my entire career in cybersecurity, got a bachelor's and master's in cyber, have all the acronyms people seem to care about in cyber, spend a lot of time in the industry, whether it be, as a practitioner, as a consultant, even advising certain SaaS security companies on their strategies. This is just what I love to do. And so we're going to talk about the challenges of a modern CISO. Now, you may think of some of the more common things that you keep hearing about, the SEC, that's a hot topic. We're not going to talk about that. Getting budget, we're not going to talk about that. Securing AI, that's a really popular one. You kind of have to talk about AI if you're going to have a leadership conference. We're going to talk about that later. I'm going to talk about a little bit more around the leadership aspect of that. But Malcolm and they're going to talk about the specific ways to secure AI. We're going to talk about how to be a leader in this era. And so, see if my screen is working. Great. So the three topics that we're going to cover is leadership in a neurodiverse workforce. 1/5 of the population is believed to be neurodivergent across the world. That means 1 out of 5 people. The number has fluctuated between 1/5 and 1/3. I go with the bottom number just to be conservative, but that's a lot of people. A ton of people. Think about what 1/5 of that group looks like. So we're going to talk about how to lead this 1/5 of the population. Next is, we are in the AI era. It is among us. How do we actually change the way we lead in this era? We're going to talk about that. And then lastly, we're in a multi-generational workforce. In fact, there are 5 generations, quickly becoming 4. There may be a few people that identify with the 5th generation. It's people that are 79 and older. Some of them are still working. Don't know if they're on this summit right now, but if you are, welcome. This conversation, this message that I'm going to share with you guys, it's for all generations. You will see different parts where I hone in on certain ones. And it's also going to be very interactive. I'm hoping that you guys have gotten into the Slack and that you're looking at the questions for speakers, because I'm going to ask a number of questions. I want to see what your thoughts are and your responses are before we proceed forward, because this is really meant to be a conversation that we're having back and forth. So please leverage the Slack. I can't emphasize what Frank shared earlier. The Slack is really the value that you're going to get from this summit. The Slack is where you're going to build the network, where you can build the relationships. In security, it's not just about what you know, it's who you know, and it's who knows you. And it could be just to have someone that you can bounce some things off of. It could be for a new opportunity, or it could just be someone that understands the struggles that you're dealing with that you can have a conversation with, because our families don't typically always understand. So please leverage the Slack. Please make use of it. It will be a value add to you and your career. So, leadership in a neurodivergent workforce. Let's start off with a quick question. I gave this answer, but let's see who was listening. What % of the US population is neurodivergent? I'm going to pull up the poll and see what you guys say. I'll give a little bit of time to see. All right. I see a lot of you were listening. I see 4 of you so far were not. Overwhelmingly, the answer has been correct. Yes, 15 to 20% of the population is believed to be neurodivergent. And that number is actually growing because it's really around the population that actually understands they're neurodivergent. This is somewhat of a generational issue. We're going to talk about generations throughout this, but your workforce is full of neurodivergent people, or there are plenty of people that didn't get opportunities because they were neurodivergent. We're going to talk about that and how to make sure that we are better leveraging this underutilized set of the population. One more question. What percent of Gen Z identifies as neurodiverse? And we're going to define neurodiverse later, so if you don't know what it means, it's okay. But for those that actually understand what it means, Justice, I understand. You might be wrong a few more times, buddy. What percent of Gen Z identifies as neurodiverse? These are all really large numbers. We just talked about 1/5 of the population is neurodiverse, but Gen Z, 30, 50 or 50. Yeah, I have a bad poll. I wrote 50 twice. You have 2 opportunities to potentially get it wrong or right. How many of you guys think the number is 30, 50, or 50? Turns out the answer is 50. I almost made it impossible to get the answer wrong. Over 50% of people believe they're neurodiverse. That's a large number. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, Gen Z is more aware than any other generation of what neurodiversity is. They understand bipolar, they understand ADHD, they understand autism. You know, you asked 25 years ago, people didn't really understand those things. And you go even further back than that, and they might even be in a psychiatric ward or something because of the different behaviors that they were demonstrating. But another reason why Gen Z identifies as neurodiverse, number one, you look at a lot of the leaders today, people that are in pop culture, they have a lot of the behaviors and characteristics of neurodiverse people. Kanye West openly says he's bipolar. Elon Musk says he's autistic. You see that being neurodivergent is not a ceiling to your capacity or career anymore. In fact, it could be a superpower. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. But there's also other benefits of being neurodivergent as a Gen Zer. In school, they had accommodations. Maybe they got some headphones. Maybe they got to get out of class a little bit early. Maybe they had, questions read to them on a test instead of having to read them. Maybe they had more time during tests, right? So Gen Z is fully aware of what neurodivergence is, and they understand some of the benefits of being neurodivergent. So let's talk about what neurodiversity is. I used the term a bunch of times. I haven't explained it. It's actually fairly simple. There are neurotypical and then there's neurodivergent. A neurotypical person is someone that has cognitive patterns and thought processes that are like the majority of people, thus making their neural process typical. Neurodivergent is someone with cognitive differences that are different from the majority, i.e. neurodivergent. PTSD, Tourette's, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, all of the things that are, different learning challenges, all of those things fit into the bucket of neurodivergence. Now, it's easy on the surface to see those as a deficiency, as something that is going to limit somebody, but it's really just a difference. If you harness it appropriately, it's a difference, not a deficiency. And that misconception and stereotype has held back so many people from either admitting that they're neurodivergent or from actually being able to walk into their purpose and everything that they have. And as leaders, it's our job to recognize that and to make the world that they're operating in as comfortable as possible, and also to not limit an entire group of people, 1/5 of the population, from being everything that they can be. I believe this is the most untapped talent pool that we have. Absolutely. In 2 different ways, either untapped as in they didn't check the boxes during the interview process because they didn't come across as a neurotypical, something that you're expecting to see, or untapped as in they're in your organization, but they have limited opportunities because they're considered to be the weird one. They're considered to be the odd one, the one that's antisocial, the one that people just don't want to have a conversation with, the one that does things different from everybody else, maybe the one that thinks differently, the one that communicates differently. This untapped talent pool could add so much value if we harness it appropriately and we accommodate this group of people. There are so many benefits to being neurodiverse, and you can hear all of those different conditions and think that there aren't. So I'm going to talk through some of the benefits. The first one is they bring a different approach to thinking. If you get, 50 neurotypical middle-aged white men in a room, let's say, you're going to have some differences of opinion, because that's just normal, we're all human. But for the most part, you're gonna have some of the same similar thought track. If you get 50 neurodivergent middle-aged white men in the room, you're gonna get conversations from here and here, thoughts over there, maybe one person over in the corner processing independently and then bringing it back to the table. But you're gonna have a completely different set of outcomes. Innovation is gonna look a little bit differently, and you're gonna have a much more well-rounded team, especially if all of those men in the room feel comfortable enough to truly bring their whole selves to the office. And I use white men as an example because that's always presumed as the group of people in any industry that's the most dominant and so forth. But it could be women, it could be African American, it could be anything. It has nothing to do with the exterior. It's all about the cognitive. And that's why I use the same exact control group, because the brain is the difference here. We're talking about cognitive diversity. Next, your population of neurodivergent people in your workforce, especially in cybersecurity, are most likely your most technical people. And what I mean by that is you can be an auditor, you can be in GRC, you can be in business continuity, but who would want to be in that, right? But you can be in any of those things and be neurodivergent, but most likely if you poll the population, it's going to be your engineers, it's going to be your architects, it's going to be your developers, it's going to be your security analysts, because their brains are extremely logical. If this, then this. There's no emotion in that. There's no need for emotion in that. It is pure logic. And those are the people that you need to truly empower to go and do the deeply technical things that you need. And that may mean that they have to enter into conversations where they may not necessarily come across from a communication perspective like everyone else, but the input and the value that they add is immeasurable. Another thing from your neurodivergent workforce is that they crave structure. So I talked about logic, right? Rules give them guardrails to operate within. When you give a neurodivergent person a procedure, they're going to follow it to the T because that's what the rule is. Your policy, your procedure, it may suck. And if it does, they're going to find it because they're going to follow it, right? Other people, neurotypicals, will often look at it and say, well, this step doesn't make sense. I'm going to do it a little bit differently here. And that may be the right path to go. But if you want to find out if your policies and procedures are correct, you want to have someone shine a light on the cracks in your program, your neurodivergent population is going to do that. And they're going to do that with a little emotion. They're going to say, that's wrong. That's not right. They're going to be a little bit more blunt about it. So you got to have thick skin, but they're telling you the truth. They're telling you the truth that they don't know how to wrap an emotion, that they don't know how to sugarcoat, because that's just not how their brain works. It's very specific and it's very sequential in many cases as well. I'll give you a story. I had a conversation with someone and I saw like every single day he is on his computer working for 8 straight hours except for his lunch period. And it's not a bad thing, but it's not necessarily common either. Usually people take a second to have a conversation or they go on social media. So I'm just asking him about these things. And he said, well, I come to work every day, 9 to 5. My job is to do my job. So I do my job. I'm like, yeah, but you don't like scroll LinkedIn or something? Like, I'm on LinkedIn at least like 15 minutes. He was like, are you telling me that the policy is not accurate and that I can just have personal? I'm like, okay, whoa. I'm programming you in the wrong way. Not that I don't want him to be able to feel comfortable in doing other things, but I realized the path and the way I was taking it was literally changing his guardrails, right? And that's just the way the brain works within that group of people. And if they feel included, you will see a complete difference in your team. You will see a complete difference in your workforce. So how do you actually be inclusive in an environment like this? So your neurodivergent population during the pandemic was the most productive it's ever been because they could control their environment. They could control the sounds. They could control the lighting. Nobody was walking up to them trying to touch on them and hug on them and do all the things that make them uncomfortable. They were able to turn off the camera on Zoom when they wanted to and not have to deal with all the stimulation from having to, see faces and wonder how their face is looking and try to read other people. They can just work. try to do those same things in your own environment. Now, some of you guys, you may not be in the position to make these changes because you may not be in the leadership position, but all the leaders out there, I implore you to try to accommodate your neurodivergent workforce. It could be headphones. It could be giving them some quiet space every once in a while. It could be something as simple as saying, you know what, you don't have to be on camera for Zoom. It will make them more comfortable. And anyone that's more comfortable will be more productive. Anyone that's more productive will just be happier at the end of the day. The next one is feedback and communications. It is not providing any value to give someone feedback that is not helpful. If you tell somebody that's neurodivergent that we would like you to be more social, or that we want you to make better eye contact, or that we want you to be on camera every single time, that is literally asking them to do something that their condition prevents them from doing or makes it really, really uncomfortable and hard to do. That's just not going to be helpful. So if you recognize that they're neurodivergent, probably don't tell them to be more like a neurotypical, right? Another one is feedback. In the security world, in the leadership world, we're kind of taught to use the sandwich method. Give someone some good feedback, sandwich in there some constructive feedback, and then give them some more good feedback so that they can leave with the emotional high of hearing something positive at the end of the day. Your neurodivergent population, that is confusing to them. What are you telling me? Are you telling me that I did good because you just said something bad and you just said something good? Just be direct with me, right? They want you to be direct so that they know exactly what they need to do next. And they're going to be direct with you. They have no choice. That is just how they operate. So if you do some of these things, you'll create a more inclusive environment. All the topics I'm going to talk about today could be a whole keynote in themselves. In fact, this was an entire keynote in itself that I've given in the past at the SANS conference. Feel free to go look at it. There's much, much more data on this. But as a modern leader in cybersecurity, 1/5 of your population is neurodivergent. More so than that, 50% of Gen Z believes they're neurodivergent. That is your incoming workforce. You cannot afford to ignore this workforce, what makes them most successful. I'll leave you with this on this topic. You went and hired somebody straight out of college, straight A's, great reviews, and they come in and they're underperforming. What you didn't realize is they were neurodivergent. They had accommodations throughout middle school, high school, even in college, they're getting accommodations. Now they come to your world where you don't give them those accommodations and they're underperforming. That's on you. That is the world that we're moving into. All right, let's talk about leadership in the AI era. What percent of workers pass Gen AI as work Gen AI work as their own? Questions for the speakers, please go over there. I think the next poll is coming up. All right, I see some 54s, some 64s, some 54s. Nobody thinks 44. Really intriguing here. All right, well, the answer is 64% of workers have passed Gen AI work as their own. Why? Because Gen AI makes life easier if you know how to harness and use it. Simple as that. Especially the most standard ones, your ChatGPTs and your Bards of the world. More recently, Microsoft Copilot. Here's the deal. Companies are blocking it. Companies are stopping workers from using it. But what are the workers doing? They're going on their phone. They're doing the ChatGPT thing. They're copying and pasting it to their email. Then they're passing it off as their own. That is how it has to be done today because that's what the culture is supporting today. 5 years from now, Gen AI will be embedded into the way work is done. I think it'll be done sooner than that, but for sure 5 years from now. Gen AI is like the iPhone. So many people were like, the BlackBerry is going to stay forever. And eventually, if you had a BlackBerry, you were the most archaic person in the world, and your BES server team probably hated you because you kept on to your BlackBerry. Gen AI is going to be the same way. It's just going to be embedded in everything that we do. Today, they have to pass it off as their own. In the future, you're going to wonder why they didn't use Gen AI to do certain things. So how do we transform as leaders in this AI era? First one is to recognize that AI isn't human. That might sound obvious, but there are just certain things that humans bring to the table that AI just never will be able to. First and foremost is empathy. Empathy is something that we as humans can do and most other mammals cannot. That is something that is human. And if you can demonstrate and leverage empathy when developing influence, that is something that will drastically differentiate you from AI, of course. Also is all of just the different nuances. As a leader, we become leaders because of our experience, because of our knowledge, and because of all of those things. And part of that experience includes a level of nuance and certain types of judgment. The second thing is humans lead humans. AI will never lead humans. So your leadership skills, summits like today, and the things that you learn about how to engage with people, how to interact with people, how to influence people, those things will become paramount. Those things will be a premium because what you know and the knowledge you have is going to be a lot less valuable. So there's the experiences you have, the knowledge you have, and the wisdom that you have. Your experiences will oftentimes lead to wisdom. The knowledge, AI is going to fill that gap. You become a leader because over time, you've learned and amassed all of this information. So people could ask you questions and you can give it answers. Well, you don't have to give people answers anymore because they could probably ask a lot of those questions of AI, unless it was something that requires experience or wisdom. Another thing that we need to transform is the way that we build trust in AI. Security people for the longest have worked with AI. For years and years, I can't even remember back, at least maybe 10 years, we've been hearing that AI is either coming or AI is put into our security products. At least our vendors told us those in our security products. That's up for debate, right? But the reality is that we've had machine learning in our tools for a long time. We know that AI can be done safely, and all generative AI is another form of machine learning. It's on us to be at the tip of the spear. Don't just come along for the ride. I, for example, am the head of the steering committee for AI at my company. It gives my company much more confidence in the security and safe use of it when the CISO is on board and leading the way, not just kind of in the back seat being drug along. And when AI first came out, the biggest risk that everybody talked about was data loss. That's all everybody talked about. I mean, there's bias risk, there's hallucinations, there's transparency, there's ethical, there's legal, there's all these other risks, but they honed in on the data loss. That's us, that's CISOs. If we can help the business feel confident in using it, we can help enable innovation. Our job as CISOs is to enable the business to take risk. AI is just added to that list of risks. Be at the forefront and you will change the way your organization operates and you will help them innovate and compete at the same time. So what are some of the skills we need? Number one, AI literacy. If you don't know what a hallucination is, if you don't know what a RAG architecture is, if you don't know the difference between Mid-Journey and ChatGPT and Copilot, then you're not AI literate at the highest level, right? You need to be able to understand these things. There are plenty of courses that you can do. I won't plug my courses, but feel free to look me up. SANS has also put out some courses. You want to be AI literate. Next, if you don't know how to leverage your EQ, there are plenty of training, plenty of courses. EQ is going to be more important than IQ in this era where AI is making up a lot of the intelligence. Another one is strategic questioning. So it's one thing to know how to answer questions. It's another thing to know the right questions to ask. That's all prompting is asking the right questions and asking for it to do the right things. Being able to strategically ask questions is going to be paramount. And lastly, cultivating a new type of culture. And when I talk about culture, I say this all the time. My teams are probably tired of hearing it, but culture, the combination of what you celebrate and what you tolerate. You want to start celebrating the use of AI in your teams. You see someone use AI to do something, celebrate that, highlight it. Tell the team, hey, this person used AI to do this. I'll give you guys an example. This entire slide deck created by AI. Every word you see created by AI. I modified it. I made some changes to it. I asked the questions that resulted in this. I made it more for me, but I started with AI. Every graphic created by AI. And guess what? I have no shame in it. In fact, why would I spend more time doing something that AI can do in a matter of seconds? That's the world we're living in. You want your team to feel celebrated when they start to use AI. And when I say AI culture is coming to celebrate what you tolerate, I am over time. I'm not going to tolerate someone not using AI just because they're against the machine, right? No, that is the world we're moving into, and you're going to cost me more money, and you're going to require me to have more headcount if you're not properly harnessing this appropriately. So, you want to build an AI-empowered leadership team? First thing is create that psychological safety. I use the example of me telling you guys, I tell my team all the time, I use Gen AI. I ask them, hey, every strategic roadmap item we have, can AI help? Can AI make it more efficient? Can AI allow us to do more? Can AI make it a little bit cheaper? Make people feel like it's okay to use AI. Don't make them be part of that 64% that pass the work as their own. Recruit and onboard leaders that have interest in AI. So when you're bringing on a new leader, it's a new thing I added to my interview questions is I ask them a question, but I say, how would you use AI or what prompt would you create to solve this problem? I've gotten some quite interesting answers. One answer I got was I would do this prompt, and if that didn't work, then I would go to this other AI tool and I would try and see. I love that answer. There's no right answer. There is one wrong answer. I would never use AI to do that. Or I've never used ChatGPT. I won't hire somebody at this point in my leadership team that's never used ChatGPT. Because that means you're not interested in technology. That means you're not interested in the future. And that means that I'm going to have to push a rock up the hill when I'm trying to get you to innovate. That's just my approach to things. And I believe as this becomes more and more mainstream, we're going to see a lot more of that. Give your teams training and development. SANS is the best place to come and get training and development. And there's AI courses for that. And then also make it a strategic priority. Maybe give them performance targets as a stretch goal. Hey, you know what a stretch goal is? Find one of these things and make sure AI is part of it. That will change the way your team feels, knowing that they should be expecting a new coworker to come along for the ride. And that coworker is a computer, and that computer is called AI. And then lastly, you're going to buy more time on your team. You're going to save time. You're going to save money. You need to use a portion of that money and time to do some QA. We do QA on our policies. We do QA on our PCI, on our NIST programs. We do QA on a number of things. We're going to have to start doing QA on the stuff that is AI generated. Fill in the blank. AI generated, fill in the blank, needs some level of validation. And this is just a process we've never had. Could you just go and do the thing and then the thing is done? Well, if the thing is done for you, there needs to be a new process to validate what that thing was. Do those things, and you will build an AI-generated empowered leadership team that is going to help propel you and push you forward. And none of this is about securing the use of AI, which is all necessary, but you also want to be able to harness the use of it as well. All right, another fun one for me is the multi-generational workforce. So another question for you guys, another poll. What % of today's workforce is Gen Z or millennial? I'm seeing some variation in responses this time. All right, all right. 38. 38% of today's workforce are Gen Z and millennial. Gen Z and millennial is the portion of the workforce that I believe has been the most maligned. There was a period of time you can type in Gen Z is in Google and nothing positive will come after it. Millennials are afterwards, nothing positive will come after it. This portion of the workforce has been much, much maligned, but it's almost 40% of the workforce. Keep that in mind as we think about moving forward. So here's why that's important. If you look at the workforce around you, you're being forced to include other generations. Your incoming population of college hires and so forth are the Gen Zs. Millennials are becoming the leaders. Proud millennial here as an example. This is diversity that's forced upon you. So you don't create it. It's up to you how you're going to include it and how you're going to harness it. Every generation has its own hallmarks, has different things that made it the way it is, has different stereotypes associated with that, and they have different communication styles. The most obvious example is Your Gen Z population is a TikTok generation. There's shorter attention spans. And it's nothing against them. It's that that's their entire world has been a shorter attention span. So why should they have a longer attention span? They were born into a world that celebrates short attention spans and promotes short attention spans. So for you to see them come into your workforce and expect for them to have a longer attention span, it's just not logical. The challenge that we have here is finding a way to understand everything about them so that we can properly include them and leverage them and prepare them to be the future. This is the future. How we prepare them is how the future will play out. So there's 5 generations in the workforce. Traditionalists, 79 and older, for the most part, not in the workforce anymore, but there are some people that are still working. Most of them, now that the stock market is back, they're out. And then there's baby boomers. Traditionalists and baby boomers, they were the generation that had pensions. Pensions are what created loyalty. Pensions resulted in you getting a watch that said you've been here for 20 years. I'm at an organization that actually has people that are 20 years, 25 years, but for the most part, that's just not normal, right? And then there's Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. We're gonna talk about all of these guys. So your traditionalists, they're during the Great Depression. For them, everything is about loyalty, everything is about respect, everything is about authority. This is, top-down leadership, follow what the people that are above you say. A different world, we don't live in that world anymore. Part of it is because they're not even in the workforce anymore. Then there's baby boomers. People that don't know, baby boomers are called that because after the war, people came back and made a bunch of babies. More babies than we've ever seen in the US and created the largest generation ever. This generation also lived during a time of just great prosperity and a bunch of social change. They're also known for their loyalty because there wasn't a lot of value and there wasn't a lot of benefit to changing organizations. That's just not how it necessarily worked. But this portion of these generations is also on their way out the door as Gen X really takes the mantle as the oldest generation. And so Gen X, they are the first generation known as the latchkey generation. After the baby boomers, many more men and women were working. And so kids would come home and both of their parents were off at the office. And so this generation was actually the first generation to be a little bit more able to operate on their own, a little more independent. They've seen a ton of change in the world, economically and socially. They were there for the rise of technology. A lot of our technology leaders, outside of the young ones that started in their 20s, are Gen X. And then you have the millennials, proud millennial here. We're perceived to be the more tech savvy. I think Gen Z is far more tech savvy than us. I wasn't born with the phone in my hand, but I got one at a much earlier age than the previous generations. This generation is also known as the generation that started the entitlement and so forth. So some of these stereotypes, you rarely heard negative stereotypes about previous generations. This was the first generation to start seeing negative stereotypes attached to them. And then we have Gen Z. This generation was born 1997. Fun fact, the Generation Z, the entire generation, is the only generation other than the later generations that come, Alpha and others, where their entire life was during the same time as Homeland Security existing. What that means is Homeland Security needed to exist, means there were more financial issues, there were more wars, there was more domestic terrorism during this generation than any generation ever. So it's natural that this generation leans towards social issues and leans towards things that make the world a better place. Now, this might be a lot of information. You're wondering, well, why do I need to know all of this information? For one, this is what the workforce looks like. Number one, it's a ton of people that fall into these individual categories, and the ones where dedication, the ones where loyalty, those are slowly becoming less and less. When I enter an organization as a CISO, the first thing that I do is spend a month, maybe 2 months learning the business. I don't put any security controls on. Of course, there are things that come up you have to answer, but I spend my time really understanding how the business works, because you cannot secure a business you don't understand. If you try to, you're going to introduce friction that then doesn't need to be there. You're not going to consider the controls that do need to be there, and you will always be playing catch up. I think when you're leading people, it's the same way. If you don't truly understand people, then you cannot influence them appropriately. You can't get them to find things interesting or find things important because you don't understand how to get them there. This is the foundation for being an empathetic leader, understanding the other person on the other end. I'll throw one more thing out there as an example. I was a leader at the age of 24 when I took my first CISO position working in the government. I don't know how they thought a 24-year-old could do it, but it worked out. But I was leading people 40, 50, even 60 years old. There was no way that I could approach them with things that matter to me. And now, fast forward, I had a person tell me, instead of giving me this spot bonus, plant a tree in my name. I told that story to a baby boomer and they almost fell out their seat, right? They're like, I could never even imagine that. Now, there are plenty of Gen Zers that's like, nah, give me the money, right? But there are people that would rather do that. I don't think there are any of those people in the traditionalist or generation or baby boomer generation, probably not even Gen X. You'll see more and more people with those types of things that they care about. So I created something looking at a bunch of information, and it's called Our Scene Today, and it's really meant to help. Now, this is more for our senior people. So if you're in the younger generations, watch this and be amused. But effectively, this is about how to better understand the new generation that is coming into the workforce. Leaders, I implore you, if you cannot talk to, you cannot understand, you cannot empathize, you are not going to be effective as a leader. So it's called Our Scene Today. S is for speed, C is for convenience, E is for entertainment, N is for nurture, E is for entitlement. And for each one of those, there are negative perceptions as a result of that. And so we're going to walk through that. So first is speed. In the word of speed, that means anything that's slow is bad. So our generation, my generation, previous generations, I remember the world where this is how you got on the internet. Some of you have no idea what you're looking at. You've never seen this, but I'll give you an example of what's happening. That's all we heard, right? That's what it sounded like to try to get James. Yeah, exactly. That's what it sounded like to try to get on the internet. In fact, it was worse than this. You have to ask your mom to get off the phone so you could get on the internet and then wait to connect and then watch a picture slowly, pixel by pixel, form on the screen. And guess what? We thought that was amazing. We thought that was fast. Now, people are born into a world where it's like, what's the Wi-Fi password, right? Everything is speed. We have Gen AI, and month over month, it's getting faster and faster. Oh, we have GPT-3, now we have GPT-4, now we have GPT-4 with a weird 0 at the bottom of it, right? It's just all about speed. Instacart, Instagram, everything is speed, right? And so for people that never had speed, this is like transformational. But when you're born into this is just normal. So when things are going slow, that doesn't make any sense. Like I can't imagine a world where something is going slow because my whole world has been fast. So it's a microwave generation. We want things fast, 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 fast. And you can't blame them for being born into a world where everything is fast. But it's really easy and natural for us to blame them. The next one is convenience. If you take a poll of elementary kids today, there was a poll taken, and of the teachers, the most common thing that kids say is, this is hard or this is boring. That's the most common thing that they hear from kids today. Why? Because everything is convenient. Everything is at our fingertips. My kids went into a toy store for the first time like 2 months ago because Toys R Us doesn't exist. I just don't want to deal with Walmart. Don't want to pay Target prices. There are no other toy stores. So every toy they got was on Amazon. That's all they've ever known. So they know I request a toy, I get a toy in 2 days. That's just the world they live. So they get the speed and they get the convenience. They walked into a toy store and they're like, well, where is this? Where is that? Well, can we search for it? Where's the, like, they didn't understand, like their brains couldn't process it. That is the entire world they've been in. And so they're used to just so much convenience. So when you're used to convenience, it's natural to be used to ease. It's natural to be used to things being easy. And so when things are not easy, that just sounds bad. That doesn't sound like a challenge I want to step up to. That just sounds not easy. Not saying that, younger generations won't do things that are hard, but there's a good portion of them that don't like hard. Next is entertainment. We are always entertained. If any of you are bored with this, you've already probably, scrolling your phones and looking at something. If you're at an elevator waiting to get on, you're scrolling your phone on the elevator. Like, there is just no idle time anymore. That's not how it always was, right? We can remember a world when you just sat there and did nothing, right? We remember that world. Some people don't have a world like that to remember. And so when you don't have a world like that to remember, you have a need for constant stimuli. Using my kids as an example, because they're the butt of all of my jokes, they're like, Dad, I'm bored. I'm like, how are you bored? You have Hulu, Netflix, a Switch, a PlayStation. There's this place called Outside. Go out there every once in a while. Like, there are so many things that you can do, but there's just a constant need for diverse stimuli, right? Until you recognize that in the workforce, say, okay, you can either malign that and complain about that or find a way to accommodate that. As a leader, you don't have a choice. You simply don't have a choice. And I know people don't like to hear that, but that's the world that we're operating in. Boredom is actually a good thing. They actually say it helps your brain. They actually say it helps with social connection. The younger generations are the most socially connected, but also the most socially inept. It's a weird combination, but that's just the way it is. You'll find more antisocial Gen Zers and millennials than you will any other generation. And they say a lot of it comes back to just never being bored. Don't ask me, that's the science. Last one is nurture versus risk. We grew up in a world where go get a bruise, put some dirt on it, and keep it pushing, right? That's how it worked. Now we're so aware of all the safety implications. We're so aware of all of these things. And I'm guilty of this. We put a bubble wrap around our kids oftentimes. I do the same thing. Our parents did that with us as well. And when you do that, you slowly embed the idea that mistakes are a bad thing. Taking a risk is a bad thing. And once again, that's just the only world they've ever known. And then lastly is entitlement. Millennial, I am the beginning of the participation trophy generation. That's what we're called. Well, guess what? Who gave us the participation trophies? Gen Xers and baby boomers. We are the result of the generations that came before us. All of your parents thought you guys, every parent thinks their kids are listening to bad music, following bad fads. That just is what it is. But entitlement is not necessarily a bad thing, right? They expect a certain level of support, a certain level of respect, but they also may expect for things to come a little faster and easier because, as I showed earlier, everything has been fast. Everything has been easy. You can't blame them for the world that they walked into. So I gave you a lot of information. None of this was cyber, right? I believe as a leader, you need to understand these things. And I have harnessed these things. And anyone that's ever worked for me has seen me recognize these things. And this is what helps me be successful, is the truly human aspect of being a leader. So here is what I say. Tailor your leadership to the diverse area. Change your hiring. Change training awareness. Change how you give direction. Focus more on empathy and influence. Initiate the how to work with me conversation. Take these bullets, screenshot this. Teach your teams how to be most successful with you. And then if you're neurodivergent, if you're not neurodivergent, this is beneficial to anybody. People understanding this will help you interact with them better, help you interact with them the way you want to interact with them, and it'll help them be more successful with you. Do all of these things and you're going to be successful. So I'll end it with this. As a leader, sometimes we lead people like pieces on a checkerboard, meaning everybody has the same move, everybody has the same destination. I submit to you today, lead people like people on a chessboard, where every piece has a different move, every piece has a different skill set, but together we can all win the game. Thank you.